I always knew Loretta didn't like me. Not in the you're not good enough for my son kind of way, though, that too. No, with Loretta, the hatred ran colder. It was in the way she smiled with tight lips, called me Tess instead of Tessa, because it sounded less dramatic, and never looked me in the eyes unless she wanted to make a point. When I married her son Caleb, I thought maybe, just maybe, we could warm into something like family. I brought her flowers on Mother's Day, baked her banana bread when she had the flu. I even let her pick Jamie's middle name, Christopher, because she said it was a good, strong name. But none of it mattered. The day Caleb walked out, Loretta didn't console me. She didn't ask how I was holding up. Instead, she showed up 2 hours later with a casserole and said, "You'll land on your feet, Tess. I've always said you were resourceful." Translation, you're on your own. The custody agreement was simple back then. I got primary custody. Caleb didn't fight it. He moved to Arizona with his new girlfriend, and that was that. Loretta for a time seemed to respect it. She visited once a month, called Jamie every Sunday, and sent him socks and puzzles in the mail. But something shifted when Jamie turned 8. Loretta started pushing for more time. Overnight stays, unsupervised weekends. She wanted to take him out of school for trips. Once she asked if she could keep him for the entire summer. I declined, politely but firmly. That's when she began testing boundaries. One Friday afternoon, I came home from work to find my apartment eerily quiet. Jamie was supposed to be home from school, but he wasn't. His backpack was missing, and so were his sneakers. There was a note on the table in Loretta's handwriting. "Took Jamie for a sleepover. He needs a break." No call, no warning, just a note. I was livid, but I didn't scream. I didn't call the cops, though. In hindsight, maybe I should have. I drove to Loretta's house and waited on the porch until they came home the next morning. Jamie looked tired. Not scared, just tired. Loretta smiled like nothing was wrong. He had such a good time. We watched old Disney movies, and I let him have a root beer float. You should have seen him. I didn't argue. I took my son and left. But something inside me shifted that day. 3 weeks later, it got worse. I was at school teaching my second grade class when I got a call from an unfamiliar number. A woman's voice. A legal assistant. She said I'd been served. Served, I repeated dumbly. "Yes, your former mother-in-law is petitioning for permanent custody of your son. You'll receive the documents within 24 hours. She's alleging instability, psychological concern, neglect." The room spun. I didn't hear the rest of the call. All I saw was Jamie's face in my mind. Soft cheeks, curious eyes, the way he hugged my arm when he was nervous. She was trying to take him. I stumbled through the rest of the school day like I was sleepwalking. At home, I found the paperwork taped to my apartment door. Loretta's lawyer. Of course, she had a lawyer, had written a detailed argument filled with veiled insults. While Ms. Blake appears competent, there are signs of emotional distress. The child has expressed feelings of being anxious in her care. The grandmother has long provided a more stable environment. I threw up in the sink. That night, I sat on the couch with Jamie and asked him gently if anything had made him uncomfortable at home. He shook his head. I asked if Grandma ever said anything about me that confused him. He paused, bit his lip, looked away. "She said you're too sad sometimes," he whispered, "and that maybe it's better if I stay where it's calm." It felt like being stabbed, but slowly. I didn't cry. Not in front of him. I just hugged him, said, "I'm okay, you're safe, and I love you more than anything." Then I waited until he was asleep, and I stayed up all night researching family law. The courthouse smelled like paper and stale coffee. I sat on a hard bench outside courtroom 3B, clutching a thin manila folder that might as well have been empty. Inside were copies of Jamie's school reports, drawings he'd made of our apartment, and a calendar I'd printed out, showing every dentist visit, parent-teacher conference, and bedtime story I'd never missed. None of it felt like enough. Loretta swept in like a queen silk scarf. Pearls. A man in a navy suit trailing behind her with a briefcase and a look that said, "This will be easy," her lawyer. She didn't look at me, of course. She walked past with that same smile she used to wear when I brought her banana bread. The I already won smile. "Ms. Blake," a clerk called, "you can enter." I stood on unsteady legs. Inside, the judge, gray hair, tired eyes, looked up as if we were another file in an endless stack, a formality, a nuisance. I sat down. Loretta's lawyer stood first. He was polished, warm even. He used words like concern and stability. He called Jamie a gift and Loretta a constant figure of love and structure. Then he handed over a letter, written by a counselor Jamie had seen once under Loretta's direction. It claimed Jamie had expressed anxiety and a desire for peace and consistency. I didn't even know he'd been taken to a counselor. The lawyer paused dramatically before saying, "We understand this is difficult, Your Honor, but the child's well-being must come first, and all signs point to the grandmother being better equipped for consistent care." Then he sat. The judge turned to me, "Ms. Blake, do you have representation?" I swallowed, "No, Your Honor." "Proceed." I stood, my knees cracked. I held the folder like it might shield me from the coldness in the room. "I'm Jamie's mother," I began, voice barely above a whisper. "And I love him. He's not just someone I care for. He's my son. I know his favorite bedtime story. I know he hates eggs unless they're scrambled with cheese. I know he hums when he brushes his teeth. And I know that he's scared, not of me, but of being taken." I passed up the calendar, the school letters. A picture he drew last Christmas of me as a superhero with Mama on the cape. "I don't have money for experts. I'm not polished, but I'm here. And I show up every day." The judge nodded slowly but said nothing. Then Loretta spoke, with honeyed venom. "I want what's best for Jamie," she said. "Tessa's not bad, but she's tired, worn down. I see it every time I pick Jamie up. The dark circles, the skipped meals, the piles of laundry." She dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "I just want to help." The judge scribbled something. Then, to my horror, he said, "We'll schedule a temporary review. In the meantime, Jamie will reside with Ms. Loretta Blake. We'll revisit custody pending further evaluation." I couldn't breathe. Jamie was to stay with her starting that night. The drive home was a blur. The apartment felt hollow without his shoes by the door. I sat on the floor in his room holding one of his stuffed animals, the raccoon he named Buttons. I didn't cry, not then, not yet. I couldn't afford to fall apart. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched my son become a shadow. He was allowed to call me, but only at specific times. He sounded different, flat, hesitant. Once he asked me, "Mom, are you okay, being alone?" I said yes, but my hands trembled as I hung up. Then the evaluations began. Social workers came to my apartment, asked if I kept alcohol, if I'd ever shouted, if I felt emotionally overwhelmed. They took notes as they looked around. One leaned close and asked, "Do you have any history of depression, Ms. Blake?" I told the truth. Yes, postpartum for 6 months. I got therapy, I recovered, but I never hurt Jamie, never endangered him. Still, I saw the click of the pen, the silent mark against me. Loretta, meanwhile, started painting a public picture. She posted photos on Facebook. "Movie night with my sweet boy, grateful. He's finally safe and smiling again." Safe? As if he hadn't been safe with me every second of his life. Then came the date for the final custody hearing. And something happened I never expected. Loretta's lawyer requested that Jamie speak in court. He was only 9. I didn't want it. I didn't want him in that room. But the judge agreed. "We'll allow it under supervised protocol," he said. Jamie was going to take the stand. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake replaying every bedtime story I'd ever read to him, every sandwich I'd cut into triangles. Every morning, I braided his hair because he liked it flat on the sides and puffy in the middle. I wasn't afraid of Jamie lying. I was afraid he'd been made to forget. The morning of the hearing arrived wrapped in fog. The kind of fog that clings to your skin, not just your coat. I woke before dawn, couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Jamie's voice in my dreams, soft, small, asking, "Do I still get to come home?" His words looped like a whisper through my brain. I burned the toast. Forgot the coffee was brewing until the pot was hissing empty. My hands were shaking when I buttoned my blouse, a navy one Jamie liked because he said it made me look like a hero mom. I wore it like armor. I drove in silence. Every stoplight felt like a moment too long. I kept checking the back seat out of habit, expecting to see his little sneakers kicking rhythmically, but it was empty. Outside the courthouse, everything moved like the world hadn't changed. Lawyers rushing clerks, balancing coffee cups, parents holding sticky-handed toddlers. I was invisible, except to myself and to the storm inside me. Courtroom 3B felt colder than last time. Loretta arrived with her usual air of control. Dark sunglasses, tight curls, pinned back lips, painted war red. Her lawyer followed behind, carrying his briefcase like a weapon. They looked like they were attending a performance, not a custody hearing. I scanned the benches, my breath caught. Jamie was already there, sitting beside Loretta. Shoulders hunched, hands clasped, eyes staring straight down. I wanted to run to him, hold him, but I knew I couldn't. Not yet, not here. The judge entered. We all rose. "This is a continuation of the Blake custody matter," he began. "Per prior agreement, the minor will be permitted to share a personal statement." My heart dropped. I didn't want Jamie on that stand. He was only 9. He still mispronounced spaghetti and needed a nightlight. How could anyone expect him to carry this? But the court did. Jamie stood when his name was called. His little frame barely filled the space. He walked up to the stand, slow and careful, like each step might crack beneath him. A clerk placed a small stool so he could reach the microphone. The judge leaned forward kindly. "You're doing great, Jamie," he said. "Just tell us how you've been feeling." Jamie opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked at Loretta. She gave him the smallest, sharpest nod. He looked at me. I didn't move, I didn't smile, I just held his gaze. Let him know I saw him. And then with shaking hands, Jamie reached into his pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper, creased and soft at the edges, like it had been opened and closed 100 times. I wrote something, he said quietly. Can I read it instead? The judge nodded. The room held its breath. Jamie unfolded the paper. His voice was soft, but every word landed like a pin dropped in silence. My name is Jamie Blake. I'm 9. I like science pancakes and superhero books. I love Grandma, but I miss my mom. Mom makes pancakes that look like dinosaurs. She lets me stay up on Fridays to finish comic books. She knows when I'm faking a stomachache. She cries when she laughs too hard. She reads like she's inside the book. Grandma says Mom forgets things, that she's tired, that maybe I should stay where it's calmer. But my mom never forgot me, not once. When I'm sick, she stays up all night. When I'm scared, she makes up songs to make me brave. I like Grandma, but I love Mom, and I want to go home. Jamie paused, looked up, eyes glassy but unblinking. That's all he said, folding the paper again with care. The courtroom was dead silent. Even Loretta looked frozen. Her lawyer cleared his throat. Your Honor, the child may be expressing. The judge raised a hand. We'll adjourn for review, he said, voice calm but heavy. And I'd advise counsel not to question the sincerity of a minor who just poured his heart out in front of a courtroom. He turned to Loretta. If we find any evidence that the child was manipulated, threatened, or coached, it will affect not only this case, but your standing with family services. Loretta said nothing. Her pearls looked tighter around her neck. Her lawyer scribbled something furiously. Court adjourned. Jamie stepped down and didn't walk to Loretta. He walked to the far side of the room and sat alone, feet swinging back straight. I waited in the hallway. I didn't expect him to come running. But he did. Mom, he whispered, burying his face in my stomach. I didn't want to make anyone mad, but I had to say it. I had to say the real thing. Tears blurred my eyes as I knelt and hugged him. You did, baby. You said the realest thing in the room. He pulled back. You're not mad. Never. I said you were so brave. That night we weren't together yet. Legally, nothing had changed. But emotionally, everything had. He had taken the stand, he had spoken the truth, and he had broken the silence that Loretta tried so hard to build. Now the courtroom wasn't hers anymore. The next move would belong to justice. The waiting was worse than the hearing. For 5 days, I checked my email every hour. Jumped every time the phone rang, slept with the courthouse website open on my laptop, refreshing the docket page like a habit I couldn't break. Jamie was still with Loretta, court-ordered until final review, but something had changed. He called me every night now, longer, each time. The tone in his voice was lighter, like the weight was lifting. He started ending each call the same way. I meant every word I said, Mom. And I'd whisper back, I know, baby, I know. On the 6th day, my inbox lit up, subject custody ruling, Blake v. Blake. My hands trembled as I clicked. Based on testimony, the child's written statement, and evidence of potential undue influence from the petitioner, the court finds in favor of Tessa Blake. Full custody is restored immediately. Visitation rights for the petitioner are suspended pending further evaluation. I gasped, dropped my phone. Jamie was coming home. I arrived at Loretta's house before the ink on the ruling had dried. A court officer stood beside me. The moment was official, but far from quiet. Loretta opened the door and looked me up and down like I was dirt tracked in on her rug. You're early, she said stiffly. No, the officer replied. She's right on time. Jamie appeared behind her. His face lit up, but he didn't run. He walked slowly, deliberately. He was holding something, his folded letter. I want to go now, he told her, polite but final. Loretta looked at him, then at me. Her jaw clenched. I did what I thought was best. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I just held my arms open. Jamie stepped into them without hesitation. Back at home, the apartment felt whole again. Jamie unpacked one small bag, just clothes, books, and Buttons the raccoon. He didn't talk much that night. He just kept looking around like he was checking to make sure everything was real. At bedtime, I asked, do you want me to read or do you want quiet? He smiled. Read but your voices, all the silly ones. So, I did. He fell asleep halfway through chapter 2, and I stayed beside him, watching the rise and fall of his chest, matching my breath to his. The next day, I got a call from a woman named Deborah Quinn, family court investigator. She said, Ms. Blake, I think we should talk. She wasn't calling about the custody case. She was calling about what Jamie had said between the lines. According to Ms. Quinn, Jamie's letter, though beautifully honest, raised red flags. Terms like calmer at Grandma's, and she said, Mom forgets me weren't just emotional. They were patterns. Your son was coached, she said, but not just for court, for months, maybe longer. I told her about the counselor Jamie saw without my consent, how Loretta had private sessions arranged without informing me or the school. Ms. Quinn asked for names, I gave them. She called me back 2 days later. The therapist had been paid directly by Loretta Sessions, undocumented, no formal diagnosis, and worse, no record of parental consent. That was illegal. Another blow, Jamie's school had been contacted twice by Loretta, once claiming I was hospitalized and once asking to alter emergency contacts without telling me. Ms. Quinn compiled everything quietly legally. Then she filed an official petition with the court to investigate Loretta for custodial interference and emotional manipulation of a minor. When Loretta was summoned for her hearing, I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. She walked into a courtroom she once controlled and found it no longer spoke her language. I later heard the report from Ms. Quinn. Loretta didn't deny what she'd done. She framed it as protective instincts, claimed she thought Tessa would break down eventually and she was trying to spare Jamie, but the judge wasn't interested in her justifications. Only the facts, and the facts were damning. She was fined, lost all visitation rights for 6 months, ordered into supervised counseling, the kind she once tried to force on me. Poetic. Jamie didn't ask to see her after the ruling. When I offered him the option to write her a letter, he shrugged and said, "Maybe later. Right now, I just want pancakes." So I made them shaped like dinosaurs, exactly how he liked. Weeks passed, then months. Peace crept back into our lives like sunlight after a storm. Quiet mornings, laughter at breakfast. Even chores became little pockets of joy. Jamie smiled more. He read books out loud to me. He asked questions about things that had nothing to do with courtrooms or adults' bad decisions. And one night, as I tucked him in, he whispered, "Mom, you didn't fight back with yelling. You just waited and trusted me." I brushed his hair back. "I trusted the truth I said and you told it." He rolled over, hugged buttons, and murmured, "Next time someone tries to take me away, can I just write another letter?" I kissed his forehead. "You won't have to." It took time for me to believe we were safe. Even after the ruling, even after the court sealed Loretta's access, even after Jamie was back where he belonged, home snuggled under his superhero blanket with buttons, the raccoon tucked under his chin, I still found myself flinching when the phone rang. Healing doesn't arrive like a parade. It comes in teaspoons, quiet, cautious, waiting to see if it's really welcome. Jamie, though, healed faster. Children have a gift for resilience that adults lose somewhere along the way. He bounced. He giggled again. He asked to go to the library, wanted to bake cupcakes just because. The boy who once whispered in fear began singing to himself while brushing his teeth. But there were shadows, small ones. He was more careful with his words, he asked before inviting anyone over. He double-checked. "You're picking me up today, right?" Even when I always did. I never missed a pickup, not once. And slowly he stopped asking. I went back to work a month later, part-time at first. My principal hugged me when I stepped into the staff room. I hadn't expected kindness, but it was there. I was still Tessa Blake, second-grade teacher. But now I was also Tessa Blake, woman who stood her ground. And they knew. A colleague slipped me a note in the break room. "My sister's going through something similar. Can I connect you two?" I said yes. That's how it began. Emails, quiet coffees. Women who didn't scream, didn't throw punches, but had been torn down slowly, silently. Like me, I started sharing what I'd learned about documentation, about court language, about knowing when to speak and when to simply show up. I wasn't a lawyer, but I was a survivor, and that mattered more than any degree. By spring, I'd helped 5 women win custody battles. All silently, all legally. None of them had to beg a courtroom to believe they were mothers. They just had to be heard. One Saturday, Jamie and I were reorganizing our bookshelves when he turned to me out of the blue. "Is Grandma gone forever?" His voice wasn't angry, just curious, like he was asking about a story whose ending hadn't been written yet. I sat down on the rug beside him. "She's not gone," I said slowly. "She just doesn't get to make the rules anymore." He nodded, thought about that, then said, "Can we donate the books she gave me?" "You sure?" He shrugged. "I want space for new ones." So we packed them up, everyone quietly. No ceremony, no resentment, just room for better stories. That summer we traveled, just the 2 of us. A small cabin by a lake in Vermont. Jamie caught frogs. I read books. We took Polaroids and taped them to the fridge when we got home. Every photo was blurry, every smile was real. One night, watching fireflies, Jamie asked, "If people ask me what happened, do I have to tell them?" "No," I said, "it's your story. You get to decide who hears it." He nodded, thought again, "But if someone else tells it wrong?" I smiled. "Then you get to correct them. Or better yet, write your own version." He grinned. "Maybe I'll make it a comic book." That fall, I got a letter. Not from Loretta, from her attorney. A single paragraph stating that she would respect the court's decision, but would be open to mediation in the future. I didn't respond. Silence was my answer. There would be no mediation, no letters, no return visits. Because forgiveness is not an obligation, especially not when it comes wrapped in self-preservation. Jamie turned 10 in December. He asked for one thing, a journal. "I want to write down things that matter," he said. "Just for me." I bought him a leather-bound one with a golden clasp. He carried it like a secret, like armor, like truth. And I didn't ask to read a single page, because his voice, his words saved us both once, and I knew they'd protect him again. On New Year's Eve, we stood by the window watching fireworks over the city skyline. Jamie leaned against me and whispered, "You didn't yell, Mom, not even once, but you still won." I kissed the top of his head. I didn't need to yell, I said, because I had you. Some battles aren't loud, some victories don't get applause. But the silence of justice, when it lands on your side, it roars.